back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys, so I'm here today to review two books that I recently read. The first of them is going to be A Song for Issy Bradley, which is by Carrie Spray, and the second one I actually have here with me. It is When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. And these two books are a bit different, but they're both blue, so that's why I'm reviewing them together, or mainly blue. So, A Song for Issy Bradley, let's start with that one. I've actually read another book by Carrie Spray, and I enjoy her work a lot, although it's more literary or contemporary fiction rather than kind of fantasy or sci-fi, that kind of stuff. I will say I picked this one up after buying it many years ago. I didn't really remember what it was about when I picked it up, but I've been trying to make more of an effort to read the things on my shelf, and it's been on my shelf for a long time, so I decided to go for it. And it's a Mormon-focused book. I think actually Carrie Spray was or is a Mormon, so it's very much kind of drawing on her past and her knowledge of the Mormon faith, but I don't know an awful lot about Mormonism or Mormons. I've seen the musical The Book of Mormon, but I'm pretty sure that is heavily stereotyped and not very accurate to reality. So it was interesting to actually read a book from a point of view where I believe the author has experience with it. It's focused on one particular family after they lose one of the members, Issy, who is their youngest daughter. She is a pretty normal girl, pretty happy and things like that, but she ends up getting a really awful disease which rapidly declines, and she ends up dead very, very quickly right at the start of the book. So this is not a spoiler, but this really focuses on the after effects of the death of her on her family, and just how they all have different methods or ways of coping, or in some cases of just not coping. And it's very much about the Mormon faith and how that for some people is a big part of recovery, and it's a big part of kind of getting better. But then for other people in the family, it's not at all that. It's actually a hindrance, and it's something that they find very difficult to deal with, and kind of respect the ways of their faith. So a lot of the story comes back to faith and their grief and their church and their community and how they deal with it externally and internally as a family. So some of the characters we focus on, we have Zippy, who is the eldest child. She is very, very determined throughout her life to be a good Mormon girl. However, she is also at the point in her life where she is starting to think about romance. She is starting to think a little bit more about her future, and she's struggling with how to kind of reconcile that with the death of her sister and also with her family and how they are reacting, because they're all doing very different extremes, and her mother in particular is taking this very, very hard and has a real struggle with kind of dealing with Issy's death. Al is the next one. He is dreaming of becoming a pro footballer. However, this is not something that the Mormon faith necessarily reveres, and so he's pretty upset about the fact that he doesn't tend to get a lot of support in this area. He really does want to and does believe that he can do something with his life, and football is that passion that he has. But Mormonism is not really allowing him to do that, or at least the way his family practice it, because his family, particularly his dad, is very high up in the church and a big part of kind of following all the rules and doing everything right. So it's a bit difficult for him to stand out from the crowd when all he wants to do is something they don't want him to do. And then we have the younger child, who is called Jacob, and Jacob is just, he's very sweet, he's very innocent, and he is just desperate to get his sister back. He doesn't really believe that she's dead or that she's gone. He just thinks something will help her. He knows about, like, in the Bible, how certain things happen and people can be reborn, and this influences him a lot. He really believes that Issy is coming back somehow, and he is working to do whatever he can to get there. Claire is their mum, and she really loses her way after Issy dies. Of course, a mother losing a child is going to be pretty heartbreaking, and she really goes through it with the heartbreak. She struggles an awful lot. She married into Mormonism, and it's not something that necessarily she grew up with or that she learned as a child, so it's a harder adjustment for her anyway, and there's things about it that she doesn't love. But with all of that added on top of the death of her child, it's really difficult for her, and she finds it a real struggle. She sinks into a pretty deep depression, and a lot of her story comes back to this depression and how everything is very difficult for her to do. And her loss is just, it's overwhelming. She can't stay focused on anything but her loss, and trying to sort of believe and also appreciate the loss is very hard balance for her. Ian is the dad, he is the bishop in the family, he is quite high up in the church, he is constantly called on by neighbours and friends and things like that. So he always has this positive outlook. He really believes in his faith, he really embraces it, he's the driving force for the Mormon faith in their family. But he's not necessarily that good at opening up and confronting his feelings or the feelings of those in his family if they don't coincide with what the Bible teaches. He's determined to be there for his family, but he doesn't necessarily always know how to be, and he struggles a little bit. Even he, with his really solid faith, struggles a little bit and questions a little bit as the story goes on. Overall, it was a very easy read. I think I read it in about one session, really, so it was not a difficult read at all. And it was quite page-turning whilst I was in it, but then coming away from the story, I feel like I haven't kept a lot of it with me. So it's probably not one I'm going to keep on my shelves now that I have read it. I did enjoy it, and I do think it raises some interesting points, especially if you are interested in Mormonism. But for me particularly, it doesn't resonate in a lasting way, and I think that's what I miss from it. So yeah, I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. I would say it's worth a read if that's appealing to you, but it definitely didn't stay with me in the same way I would have liked it to. Next up is When Breath Becomes Air. This is a kind of autobiographical story told from the point of view of Paul. He was in training to become a neurosurgeon. He was very much looked up by a lot of people in his field. He was an up-and-coming star in his area, and he had a big future ahead of him. However, unfortunately, and this is a true story, he was diagnosed with cancer as part of when he was learning. He had some negative stuff going on and felt like maybe that's what it was, and he did eventually get tested and found out that he did have cancer, and it was terminal cancer. So he'd always wanted to write, and he started writing this book not too long after he found out about it. And actually we follow his journey, not just as he's going through cancer, but also kind of the journey leading up to finding out about it, his childhood and what he had big dreams to do, and then also kind of going through the motions of treatments and how that can impact on a person and their family and kind of crush the dreams that you had already built up. It's a pretty horrible thing. I'm sure everyone knows someone who's been through cancer of some kind. It's a horrible disease, whatever form it takes, and to see it written from a first person point of view about how you're dealing with it and how you kind of get through day to day was quite poignant. It was quite heartbreaking at times. And actually the last chapter of this is written by his wife, because he does die from his terminal cancer before he can finalize the book. And I thought that was really heart-wrenching to see her kind of view on it. But I'm really glad that this book got published as well, because it was clearly a passion project for him, something he really wanted to do. And I think that comes across in his writing. It's a very short book. It does not take long to read at all, but it's well worth it. It's well worth giving a try, because it's something that a lot of us hope not to experience, is cancer, but it is something that even if we don't experience it ourselves, someone we know probably does in some form experience cancer in our lifetime. And to get an idea for how that feels and like the things that they might be going through or feeling, I think it's worth reading just for that. The story, of course, is not happy because it's dealing with this very real medical condition and this medical illness day in, day out, but it is really informative. It's really interesting. He's a very clever writer and a very clever person, as you can imagine, for someone who was training to be a neurosurgeon. So I like the way that he wrote, and it felt very easy to get into. Despite him having all this medical training, I felt like it wasn't overbearing in any way. I think there's not an awful lot I can say about it because that is it in the crux of it. But it's worth reading for sure, and I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. I definitely would have liked to have a little bit more insight into him. Personally, I don't think he opens up as much as he could have done, but having said that, it's a really hard topic, so I don't know how much you would want to really see the breakdowns day to day, but I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. So I'd love to hear if you read this one, or if you've read the Cara Spray one, what you thought of them. Do let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you very soon, guys. Bye!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.